Sorry for the slight delay. We had to just change something on the AV side of things, but to those of you that submitted the many questions for the conference and for the international panel, and to our international panel that's travelled all this way to join us, we'll make sure we have the full time, so we'll just compress the very last piece of the conference, and you will get away on time or have another opportunity to talk with the other folk. And we've had a lot of buzz in the breaks. So how's the UK's first accessible conference on publishing? How's the UK's first conference on accessible publishing going? Is it going okay? Yeah, I'm having a great time, and I'm learning a lot and having great conversations. So I hope you're having as good a day as I am. But as we've heard many times, accessible publishing is a global imperative. And in this section, we'll learn about the journey to born accessible ebooks and other books from around the world. On our amazing Brains Trust panel, we have Avneesh Singh from India, Cristina Mussinelli from Italy, Laura Brady from Canada, Michael Johnson from the USA, and Pedro Milliet from Brazil. A round for our panel, please. Oh, and thank you again for those of you that sent in the many questions, and we will try also to incorporate any questions from within the room and online that prepare. But we've basically taken questions that we've got, we've condensed them where we can, and we've tried to run them in a reasonable running order to get the best value from this slot for you. And we're going to jump straight in on the topic of the latest accessibility standards and on something we just learned more about on accessibility metadata. And our first questions come from Julie and Robert, and they relate to accessibility standards and metadata. So Avneesh, as chair of the Accessibility Task Force at W3C, I'll start with you. 3 questions. Which are the current standards for making publications accessible, and are these stable?
Wow, that's a nice question. Hello, everyone. Well, thinking about the accessibility standard, I also think about George. George, should I start from PDF? So PDF has a history. PDF has the popular standard used by PDF is one of the ISO standard, which is the 14289. But after that, the WCAG is being used. WCAG has been used extensively for HTML, EPUB, and PDF. The latest version of Web Content Accessibility Guideline is version 2.2. And I would recommend please use 2.2. There is a reason behind it, especially if you are from the international market. The vertical writing. WCAG 2.1 has some criteria where the clarification for vertical writing was not proper, but it has been fixed in WCAG 2.2. And further fixes will be provided in the errata. So for the for accessibility as well as for internationalization support, I would recommend use WCAG 2.2, which works with HTML, CSS, and also PDF techniques are there. But there is a limitation. WCAG, you can apply it to the publication, you can apply it to the EPUB, but it doesn't provide any guidance for accessibility metadata. Content, yes, you can check. Further to it, it doesn't provide the guidelines for interrelation between the different HTML pages of an EPUB publication. So this is why we came up with the EPUB accessibility specification. The latest version is version 1.1, which is completely aligned to the requirement of the European Accessibility Act. A great work done by a whole global team. A round of applause for all the people who are involved in it.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about accessibility metadata. Rick Johnson gave, wow, what a great example, access more sufficient equal to textual. I will say access more sufficient equal to textual, comma, audio, comma, visual.
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah. It's a jargon, absolute jargon. We need a way to, a guidance document to tell the retailers and the distributors how to extract this this accessibility, machine-readable accessibility metadata, and not only extract, but also display it to the users in a user-friendly way. So with the motivation of Rick Johnson, some years ago, we started work on the user experience guide for accessibility metadata, and the first version was released in September 2021. It was a big hit, yes, of course. At the same time, we realized that there are some problems that we need to fix. What were the problems? I would highlight only one problem, which is the biggest of all. In the first version, we highlighted the key accessibility metadata that retailers and distributors should be showing on the website. For example, screen reader friendly, for conformance metadata, or hazards. Well, we got extensive feedback, and we came to know that display of this key accessibility information is very much textual. A trade publisher would like to highlight some different set of accessibility metadata at the top, while an education publisher would like to highlight something else. It is greatly dependent on the audience. So we started the revision of the user experience guide for accessibility metadata, and we are now working on the next revision. And here, we are not prioritizing, we are not giving a kind of laundry list of these are the most important accessibility metadata that you must be showing. What we are doing, we are just explaining how can you explain this metadata in a user-friendly way. And we provide the techniques document which tells you if you are using Onyx, this is how you will interpret it. If you are using EPUB accessibility meta and schema.org, this is how you will interpret it. And then you may be thinking, okay, this is fine, but still we need some guidance. Now, guidance can be varying around as per the audience. So we will be having a new section which provides the example of implementations. Great news is that both VitalSource and LEA Foundation has agreed to provide the implementation example, which will show how VitalSource is prioritizing it, how LEA Foundation is prioritizing it, and we are open to more examples here. So you can from there make out that okay, this kind of example matches our audience. So let's follow this example. So this is how we are moving it forward. The next revision, the draft document we are working on, you can join the publishing community group for that. And we are expecting the release to be in the next year. We will start with the public working draft, and it will move to the final working draft during the due course, getting feedback from all of you.
That's great. Wonderful. A very full answer, very detailed answer, and even something that you can do to help move that forward. There is a supplementary question, which is also, I don't have a name against this one. If the accessibility metadata is missing or indicates that a title is not accessible, what happens then? What is that working group kind of suggesting might happen on the retail site or the library site, Avneesh?
Very complex question. Now,
I need to ask you to keep your answer maybe a little bit short, if that's okay.
Fine, sure. So this is the discussion that we are having at this point of time. Rick Johnson asked a question. I have Onyx, I have schema.org. My question would be, there will be Mark 21 and Mark also. What would you do? So its prioritization is, we have not nailed down this question yet. And let's see if we are able to nail down this question in next year. One way which was being highlighted in the working group was maybe we should list all of them and provide the source. So this is where we are. And please stay tuned for getting the answer for these questions during the course of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Avneesh. Well, unsurprisingly, we got lots of questions related to the European Accessibility Act, and we're not going to be in a position to give you free legal advice. I don't think we're quite in that place, but thanks for those questions, and thanks in particular to the following questions, which we pulled from those submitted by Brianna, Beth, Ken, and Rachel. And Cristina, these are coming in your direction because you're from an EU country, and also you work at the European level with the Federation of European Publishers and with the Commission. So here we go, quick fire questions, if at all possible, and 3 of them. So does the European Accessibility Act clearly define the accessibility requirements, and are they in line with the accessibility standards that Avneesh just described?
Yes. Just to clarify, the European Accessibility Act has a specific annex where they highlight the high-level requirement for ebooks. So there are some high-level requirement for every product and service, and then there is a specific annex for ebooks. So the European Accessibility Act already have all the information that are needed for the publication. What is important is the work that has been already highlighted. It was the mapping that we have done to check if the requirements that are available in the Act are in line with the standard that we have. And this was a very important step because we were also able to convince the Commission to accept the already existing standard as the one that can be used to implement the directive. It's a long process because the Commission has their step, but we are also going to work with the Commission, presenting what we've already done, and then we'll start with the process of the Commission to accept formally this standard. But we can confirm that the standards that are already available, like WCAG accessibility, are in line. We have done the same work also with the metadata. So we can confirm that also ONIX and schema.org are in line with the directive. So this is, I think, the most important thing. You can start working on the standard metadata of the standard you use for your publication, and you will be in line with the Commission requirement.
Great. Next question is, so the directive is a European level directive that needs to be transposed into national law all around the EU 27. Is the European Accessibility Act consistently implemented at national level in relation to ebooks across the EU?
Okay, the directive is a European one, and then every country needs to put the directive in their own law. This should be done by June 2022. The majority of European countries have already implemented it. Some are still missing, and the Commission will start with the procedure of requirement to do it. What we know that the majority of the country has implemented the directive mainly as it is. The different options that were in the directive, that every country should define an authority to monitor the implementation at national level. For example, in Italy is the same national organization that is monitoring the web directive. It could be in France, there is another organization. So there are some organizations at national level who will be responsible for the implementation and the monitoring for the eventual technical issue or for the compliance with the people need and so on. But from the technical point, I mean, no European standard will change, for example, the standard. The standard will be defined at European level. What it could be defined at national level could be the fine, so how much you have to pay if you are not compliant with the legislation, and this will depend from single country, and there is not a mapping yet. The other element could be some specific reference to other European legislation, other national legislation, but I don't think will be very big changes from the national interpretation and the directive, not for many important elements.
Great. Thank you very much. And sticking with the European Accessibility Act, but moving actually away from Europe specifically, I'm interested in the international impact of the legislation. So for you, Laura, is the European Accessibility Act in relation to ebooks known about in Canada? And is it affecting the publishing industry, to your knowledge, in other parts of the world? So maybe others might want to come in after Laura on this.
Yeah, so really good question. I mean, on its face, I'm so envious of the European Accessibility Act. I sure wish we had something like this in Canada. Despite what Rick said about Manitoba, there's nothing with teeth in Canada that can impact publishing specifically. That said, everyone in Canada is fully aware of the EAA and is working hard to meet standards in time for the implementation of the EAA, because everyone sells books in the European Union. There's a slight edge to French language publishers in Canada. I don't like to give them very much credit, but I'll give them this credit. They're a little bit ahead of English-speaking publishers because they already sell through to France, mostly. That said, all kinds of publishing publishers organizations in Canada are organizing big, huge backlist remediation projects. That's ongoing. Through Benetech, there's a whole swath of publishers that have been recently certified through eBound Canada, which is the digital wing of the Association of Canadian Publishers. So there's tons of boots on the ground work being done to bring everyone up to speed for lots of reasons, but the EAA is definitely an impetus behind this.
Great, and I don't know if folk from...
No, may I just add one comment, because it's important to understand that the European Accessibility Act is an act that was made to protect and support European citizens. So it's not European companies. Every company who wants to serve European citizens should comply with the act.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a completely different mindset. So if you understand this, I think you understand why you are involved. If you have a European customer, you should comply.
Great. Super. So let's move to the next question. Quite a few questions around image descriptions. Simon mentioned this. This is something that gets raised a lot. And I'm going to broaden it out. The question was around the quality assurance of alt text, but let's talk about quality assurance more broadly. And Michael, Benetech, as we heard, developed the Global Certified Accessible program, and Beverly asks a couple of questions. So what level of quality assurance is reasonable to produce a good file for the end user while keeping the process as quick and efficient as possible?
That's a great question. I would say as we change everything, we should try and keep everything the same. So what I mean by that is, what level of quality assurance would you do against any other element of a book you're producing that you produced 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? What are your averages? How much do you check what the print book looks like? So don't think of this as a unique and abstract thing or something that's brand new to publishing. QA is part of the publishing process. So fitted it along those guidelines. I would say with every new bit, you should pay more attention on more elements in the beginning until you have confidence, and then you can pay a little bit less attention. But don't make it into a brand new thing. We've been doing QA in publishing since Gutenberg, right? So this is just another thing to consider in your regular process.
But something specific, and the question came in, so you're talking to publishers every day. How are publishers managing the quality assurance specifically of alt text is another question.
Right. So alt text is a massive part of the certification process. So as publishers go through the GCA certification, we spend a lot of time on alt text, and we will help you look for the most dangerous things, the most commonly occurring things. I would say you would want to build whatever percentage you're comfortable with working with the alt text. Now, the alt text comes from a bunch of different places. Some of the publishers in the room are taking alt text back to the author, just like you wouldn't accept a 15-chapter book from an author that has chapter 12 and no words, unless it's a particularly esoteric work. So if a book comes in, a lot of publishers are saying, you've got tables, charts, graphs, illustrations, you didn't describe them. We have two options. You can describe them, or we'll do it, and we'll charge you back for it, just like if you send me a book with no index or glossary. So you need to just stay inside your normal production bounds, because you don't want to delay or confuse your production process.
Thank you, Michael. And back to you, Cristina, I think, on this one. Why is accessibility quality assurance important for the end users? And the second question is, and with the tools we've heard about today, is it possible to fully automate the quality assurance these days?
Thank you very much. I think it was clear from some of the presentation that we listened this morning why quality is important for an end user. If we want to go mainstream, and if you want people pay for buying books, you need to offer them what they really need. And so you need to be sure that they buy a book and they find what they want. Otherwise, they will continue not using the mainstream accessible book. They will continue going back to the specialist organization. So the publisher need to be in line with exactly the quality of the service that users now have. And what I believe is also taking into consideration what you were saying, a publisher check every book. So the quality assurance of the accessible title must be done at every book. I think you can implement the process, you can do everything automatically, but at the end, I think you need to have a quality control for every title, especially for the more complex one, because there are a lot of detail. I don't know if it was Daniel or Romain who explained that 20% can be automated and the other one is manual. So there is a lot of work. I hope with the new tools, with artificial intelligence, the automation could be more. But for sure, we are sure also in a project that AB Lab we are doing, we will test all the tool. And if we find a tool that automatically check everything, we will be very happy. But I don't think will be the case. So we need to understand that it will be still a manual activity. And this is a very important thing, because otherwise all what we are doing will be lost.
Great. And I'm firing the questions at an individual one, but there's a panel, so if you want to add and embellish the answers that are given, please go ahead and do that. I just want to know that we've got one person to direct the questions to. And the next question is from Tim, and this relates to complex content. We heard a little bit about this earlier, including STEM materials, and acknowledging that this brings challenges, not only technical, but also in terms of cost and speed. And these challenges grow even more when we're talking about high volumes of publications. So, Pedro, when I think of scale, I often think about Brazil. So what experiences can you share from Latin America of dealing with, of making textbooks and other complex publications accessible at scale?
Well, when we're talking about scale, really, we have 40 million students in our public schools, so hundreds of books has to be made each year, and it's about in the last 2 years we had something like the people from the Arena Will also works with that in Brazil with us, but we had something like 300,000 pages per year of complex textbooks. So you can think about maybe 600,000 images to be described. We try to firstly talk to publishers and really suggest them the changes that they can do in the print process so they can give us better starts. About fonts, about how to use MathML, about a lot of different processes that you can really improve the PDF that you have to input in your system. Or the PDF, or even the InDesign, as the Arena works with the InDesign as a source, we work with PDFs. Okay, so firstly, really try to talk to publishers and improve the process there. Then after, we also listen to every aspect of the production. The people that are working with us has a lot of suggestions in the daily process of the descriptions, of the adaptations. So we really work with our own platform, and our platform goes through updates almost weekly. So we receive the input to automate processes, we receive suggestions how to make the process more efficient and more speedy. In the third part, it's technology, and we try to find the new ways to produce the contents. As an example, we receive a lot of math content that is image content. It's not text content. So we have to translate it to MathML, and then after we have to describe this formula. So we have to automate this process, because we're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of formula in these books. And then at the end, we have the quality assurance also. So we have to make the best effort to include quality assurance from the beginning, not wait to the book be ready, but starting with quality assurance of the PDF, and then after the exporting the PDF to HTML. In this process also try to recognize all the structure that we have in the printed book and automate the production of this start HTML. And during all the process, we have to look at especially image descriptions, because image descriptions, you can now try to automate some part of this process, but you always have to have somebody reviewing the final quality of this description. And description for textbooks and for math and for chemistry and for things like that, chemistry formulas, you cannot present them in other way than describing it. So that's why we try to really interfere in the process of, you have a chapter ready, so we'll look into this chapter, and we will try also to make a standard of all the processes. So we work with everybody that is providing the work that we need in terms of making them understand that everybody should look at the images in a standard way. We use a lot, of course, your guide, the image descriptions guide from the Diagram Center from Benetech. It's a reference. And then there is also the question of cost and the question of time. So I could say that in the last 2 years, together with Dorina, the We Foundation, we have produced something like 400,000 pages using this way of thinking. Thank you.
If I may, so there's been a lot of talk about AI everywhere, about everything, and can AI fix it? Well, the answer there is no, but what you want to think about is not, I'm depressed because I can't get to 100%. Because right now you're probably at 0, unless you're one of the ones who are well along the path. So the question is, what can you do, automation, processes, resources from the people in the panel here, and with a firm like Continual Engine as an example, how much from 0 forward can I get? Can I get to 45%, which means I just saved all that time and money? Can I get to 65%, so I just saved some more time and money? Not, oh, it's not working because I can't get to 100. That's not how you have to take the view of, we are currently doing nothing from an automated perspective. How far along can we get? And it makes a huge difference, because I'm looking around some of the publishers in the room and other publishers we deal with. Pearson went through our certification program. Whatever you got going on, it's not worse than what's going on at Pearson. Okay, so you talk about scale. Okay, you just need to move at a pace. And so start from 0. How far along can you get?
Sure.
No, I think the other important thing is to work at the beginning of the process. So you need to do maybe a lot of work on defining the process, defining the structure for the first group of books, and then you can improve on this following on, but it's something that you need to organize at the beginning, especially if you have to work with complex books.
Sure.
Because if you have trade books, it's quite simple. But if you have complex books, it's a process that imply a lot of other people. So if the process is not well set at the beginning, you will find many different problems along the chain. So spend time in making the design of the project and the design of the process, and we will save a lot of money afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think this is the most important. This is what we are also looking in Italy. We start working with a trade publisher. We have the process of certification of trade publisher that is in place. It's quite smooth. It's not costly. It's very easy. But we now start working with big Italian publisher. For example, we have trained 150 employees of one of the biggest group, and they involve everyone in the value chain. The communication people, the editors, the production people, some supplier, because everyone in the value chain should be aware of what they need to check. And you can do this if you have a clear idea of what could be the process and how you have to design the process since the beginning. Otherwise, it will be very complicated.
Right, well, there's some good stuff in here. I'm going to come to you in a moment, Laura. for you to tell us a bit about what's happening in Canada over the last few years, because we see that the government of Canada put lots of money to try and skill up the publishing industry there. So, but before I do, just let's see if there are any questions we have in the room, and we'll get microphones to you. We have more questions either submitted previously or coming in online. But if you put your hands up, then we'll get a microphone to you. Otherwise, we'll continue with what we've got. So, Laura, I'll invite you to tell us a little bit about this multi-year, I think, investment from the government of Canada. And you're from the publishing industry in Canada. Tell us how it's going.
Yeah, so in 2019, the federal government announced 22.5 million, maybe 5 or 9, I can't remember. Anyway, it was a bit of a surprise. It was a surprise to everyone. It was being dispersed through the Department of Canadian Heritage, and there's 2 elements to it: support for publishers and support for organizations. And so and 22.5 million may not sound like a lot to a lot of you, but it's a lot in Canada, I promise. And we have, we've performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes with that money in a way. There's been a lot done, so lots of backlist remediation projects that were supported by that, a lot of audiobooks that were created that maybe would not have been created otherwise. And just a side note, this is a support for independent Canadian publishers, not for multinationals. So any publisher that's independently Canadian owned can access the money. There's a whole process. It's not like a bank machine. I wish. But so that was a 5-year project going from 2019 to 2024. So March 2024 is when the Accessible Books Initiative ends. I'm hopeful that there'll be something that fills the gap once that ends, because I heard a publisher say recently that publishers are tired of being told what to do.
Ooh.
And I thought, oh, well, then you must be tired of getting government grants. Seems simple to me. Yeah. Because my sense is that publishers will let their foot off the gas as soon as the work isn't funded. And I call myself an accessibility busybody, and that's really because I pop up in lots of different ways and places to poke publishers to do better. Publishers are not off the hook. They can do this work, and they just need to. Cristina has a line, accessibility is a culture, that she uses quite a lot, and I think that's what sort of publishers have to swallow that wholesale and have accessibility sort of bleed through all areas of their company in order for this work to just carry on, even without the beneficent Canadian government support.
So thank you, Laura, for popping up at this place and sharing your wisdom. And you don't have to answer this question, but for the UK, do you think a similar kind of program would be helpful? Or as you look at the legacy, whether or not that's a model that didn't work? You don't have to answer the question if you don't want to.
No, I'm happy to. For some publishers, it really is a crutch. And if without that support, then they're going to be like, oh, it can't possibly do that. And I don't buy that. So I think it's a little bit of a mixed blessing. It's been foundational and wonderful, but I do worry about when it disappears, if that work disappears. So I think it's been fantastic, mostly because I've gotten to do really fun work as a result of it. But it is a bit of a mixed blessing.
Great.
So I don't want to shock anybody, but the American government doesn't really care about the American citizens. So I don't want to scare anybody with that, but that's the way it works. We have had for 33 years the American with Disabilities Act, which covers everything we've been talking about and has been religiously ignored by the publishing community. The Department of Justice and the Department of Education sent a Dear Colleague letter, which is a bit like when you get stopped for speeding and the policeman says, have a nice day when he's done with you. So, and they point out the fact that universities are regularly sued. They all lose in violation of the American with Disability Act. Unfortunately, this requires someone to bring suit. The government doesn't step in and say you're not behaving properly. So that's one thing. The other piece is, two more pieces. The other piece is the Canadians have been tremendous partners with our eBound Canada. Goes through, they use Benetech's certification process to certify all those publishers that Laura was talking about. Anybody in your country wants to have a similar talk, just let me know. But the third piece is when I go around the world, as Richard said, I have to talk to all the publishers in the world. I go around the world there were three simple things going on here as to why a publisher should do it. The first is, which should be obvious, you've been here all day, just the social justice factor of it, the rights of the citizens and all that. So you should do it anyway. I shouldn't need a second one, but I have a second and a third one, right? The second one is, it's 20+% of the Earth's population. So am I promising you a 20% increase in sales? No. Am I promising you that 20% of the Earth's population is not buying your book? Yes. You might as well try and sell my friend Pedro a book in Urdu because he can't read it, so he would not buy it, right? So that's part. The other thing is, the people who decide what you see on the internet, some of whom work in this building, are going through the fully accessible EPUB titles and surfacing all of those alt text and long descriptions. So things that aren't in your Onyx feed at the point of discovery will now be available to somebody searching on the internet because you included the proper metadata. And the third piece is the legal piece, which I think we've beaten to death here about the EAA and the ADA and the Manitoba laws.
And just another comment. If you create accessible content, platform, website, whatever, you normally improve the quality of the product and the service for everybody.
Right.
This is something we have seen in many different cases. For example, educational publisher has a very poor online digital book because they have no semantic. And we were able, working with them, to create a much better version of the digital book for all students, because adding semantic, they were able to have a much better graphic layout for all the students. So just a simple example. Or if you look at the workflow or the platform or the process of registration and so on for people with disability, then you will find very good solution for all the other people accessing the platform. So accessibility means that you need to change the process, but you need to think better on what you are doing. And so when you do this, it's something that is better for everyone. Just one last comment related with funding. We invite you, you invite us, we can change. I can give you the accessibility act and you give me the money. But the other thing I think it's important, accessibility is an innovation process. So in many countries, you may have a legislation that support not publisher, but company in general, in innovation in digital, in digitization, and so on. For example, we work with some organization, publisher, and they apply for funding for that activity, including accessibility. And they maybe don't get the full reimbursement, but for training, for example, it was possible. And for some activity, you can have a deduction, or you may have a percentage of what you spend that is given back to you. I don't know exactly the legislation in every European country, but for sure you have something similar. And so I also think if you think to that, have a look at what is available, and I think you can find some, at least partially, compensation of what you spend.
Great, thank you. Pedro?
No, I just want to add also that the textbook production for the public schools in the national program is the largest business for publishers in Brazil. So they have to be committed to it, and they are, because we have 13 years from back to the time that we were doing DAISY, and now EPUB. We have 13 years of this request that is validated by the government, so they really have to do it. So they are more and more understanding what we are doing and trying to internalize also some processes to do it better.
Great, thank you. And thanks again to the panel as you continue to share your perspectives from around the world. So just a word to the folk in the room and online. I have 3 more questions lined up. You'll need to put your hands up or send in your question now. Otherwise, those are the 3 that we'll be closing this session with before we close the conference. We have 1 question in the room. So I think we heard a little bit about the kind of online experience, the platforms here. We have a question from Peyton, which says, some devices and apps have limitations in rendering alt text. I'm wondering if publishers should expect updates to these kinds of technologies in order to comply with the European Accessibility Act. We can broaden it out, not just alt text, but other kind of accessibility features. Of course, publishers, as we heard, can build wonderful accessible ebooks, but if the reading experience of the distribution platform doesn't then allow those accessibility features to be utilized, that's a break in the chain. So what are your views from the countries that you come from, the regions that you work in? How are things going on that reading device, reading app, website service kind of journey, part of the supply chain?
Just to start, we will now use Torion as the official reader for all the books in the schools. And we are talking to Daniel also. We have been talking to Daniel about some changes that we need. So I think that this is very important, to get in touch with the people that is making the readers, like Colibri here also, and the people from ISIS and there. So I think that we must really be in touch with them and working together to get it better.
And just to remember, for the Accessibility Act, we are not only speaking about publication, but all the value chain is involved. So e-reader as devices, e-reading solution, and all the e-commerce website. So if you have a e-commerce website, every e-commerce website, not only the publishing one, are compared as the publisher.
So do we have a question in the room? Yes, so if you could say your name, please, and if it's directed at a particular person in the panel.
Hi, so I'm Simon Holt. I'm the product manager for content accessibility at the science publishers Elsevier. So my question, I think it's for everybody, but particularly our kind of European and US representatives. So the European Accessibility Act talks about ebooks specifically, but I did notice that the US Nelson memo that came out last year includes an interesting clause. I think it's clause 3A that talks about how it mandates federally funded research to be accessible for reading with assistive technology. And obviously I work for a big journals publisher, so I'll be quite interested in the panel's views as to what legislation, if any, they think might be in the pipeline, maybe a successor to the European Accessibility Act or something that talks about journals accessibility a bit more specifically.
I'm not sure I've understood.
Oh, okay. So maybe if I answer, maybe you'll understand. So Elsevier's been through the GCA program, and they were great on not on the journal side, but on the book side. The American with Disabilities Act already covers journals, so you're already not in compliance if you're not doing it. Just somebody needs to sue you first. And the recent notification, I don't remember the sub that you mentioned there, but journals in the United States would be covered as well, especially if federal funding is involved in the research, or it is being distributed in an educational institution which receives federal funding, which is most of the higher education institutions in the United States. So there's the US example. So journals, yes, you will be held to account in the US, and if it's online or digital, also in the EU.
And I also believe that if you have a public procurement, I think you are not only on the European Accessibility Act, but also on the Web Directive. And the Web Directive covers commerce, website, and also publication. So I think you need to check these two elements.
Thank you. Did we have another question in the room? We have one.
Colibrio.
Do we have? Yeah. I'm not excluding you. I'm just checking if there's someone who hasn't asked a question before, because we do have another question come in. So please, so we're going to keep this one tight. We've got 3 questions to go now. So, Lars.
Okay, for Cristina. I heard something worrying about, I think it was in Sweden, that they had discussions if e-learning environments were actually needed to comply with the Accessibility Act, which it sounded so weird that I need to ask an expert.
It depends. In some country, they are included. So this is something that could be done at national level. So, for example, in Italy, we consider educational publisher involved in that.
That sounds reasonable. Can you speak to your Swedish colleagues, please?
Okay. All right. So 2 questions to go, and then we're coming to the wrap up of the conference. So The last question was submitted by Ken, and Laura, I'm turning to you on this one, although others may want to add comments to it. This topic comes up every time we have a meeting at Page. So here we go. InDesign remains the starting point for so much content around the world. This reliance on InDesign has become a bit of a problem, with publishers reporting that it's too hard to make accessible EPUBs. Tell us a little bit about how that impacts the marketplace and how that's changing.
Okay, a big question. So InDesign is a problem. The technical debt from publishers relying on InDesign is massive, and we see that in the backlist. The backlist remediation is an ongoing process, and this is almost entirely because of InDesign. It creates junky ebooks. It can create really good ebooks, but you really have to work the gears. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I have a series of YouTube videos that goes through it step by step, like in minute, insanely boring detail, if you want. That said, so InDesign is a problem. We all recognize that. Gregorio, Richard, and I, Gregorio from LEA, have been engaged with the InDesign engineers for 2 years. And despite the snail's pace of progress, I remain stubbornly hopeful that we will get there. There have been teeny tiny incremental improvements, and a blog post came out earlier today from LEA that describes some of that. I encourage you all to go read that. Gregorio did a fantastic job with that, explaining what's happening. One of the next iterations of InDesign is going to include accessibility metadata, like a full suite of accessibility metadata that will get exported into your ebooks. And that's going to be fun and awesome. There's still lots left to do, believe me, but we're working on it.
How long do we have to wait before that metadata feature could be available to anyone on the Insider program?
That's a really good question. I think it goes into beta next week. Yes. And then it's likely to be released in the spring. I mean, their release schedule is
all right.
Not open.
We have a couple more interventions on this one, and then we have our final question.
Very briefly. Well, okay, it's going to be fantastic to have this sorted, but when we start to have interactive exercises, interactive content, this will be crazy in terms of accessibility also, and I don't see anything really going into this problem and giving us a new solution. So we are working in one of those. Maybe at the next meeting we can talk about.
Yeah.
And very quick and fair warning, don't think for a second you can hide behind the skirts of we use InDesign, so we need more time or whatever. That's not going to work. The EAA was passed almost 5 years ago. We all knew it was coming. We've all been on top of this, so keep at it.
And just, we will hold on. We never leave the Adobe engineer. But if you have the opportunity as big publisher to push on that,
sure.
Yes. Please do.
Yes.
Sure.
Because we are working in collaboration with the Federation of European Publishers, with the International Publisher Association, and so on. But I think also the big publishers who have a lot of license of Adobe should give some pressure on them.
Plus one.
And so, Ken, thank you for the question. I don't know where you are.
Sorry for being so...
No, it's good.
The question may have come because Adobe were actually in the speaker list and they were going to come, and then an issue happened with travel scheduling and funding and so on. So at a future accessible publishing event, or even better, at a future publishing event, hopefully Adobe will be standing up and talking for themselves on what they're doing in InDesign to make accessible ebooks much easier for the ebook developers. So we come to the final question as we wrap up. And this question is... Okay, so we're coming to the end of the session. We've learned from experiences from Brazil, Canada, Italy, and the USA. And so finally, thank you to our panel. I'd like to invite each of you, in the order that you determine, to provide us with the benefit of your international perspectives. If you had a magic wand with the power to make one impactful change to advance accessible publishing in the UK, what spell, maybe Harry Potter style, would you cast? So who wants to go first on this? Christina's hand went up straight away.
If I may, I would ask that every of us disappear because accessibility is done.
Okay. And how would you say the magic spell in Italian?
It's the magic spell I know. It's the one from Cinderella. That is bibidi bobidi boo.
All right. So who next is ready with their wand and their magic spell?
I'm happy to go.
Okay. And what's your casting spell? I need to hear it.
Mine is around accessibility metadata. I would love to see it implemented more and used more. No point doing all this work if users can't find it. So we need to see it exposed at the vendor and library level. We need to see publishers using it more rigorously and robustly. And we need to see it. We need to see like title management systems building in full capability so that people can describe their content in audits. So accessibility metadata is broadly used and becomes so boring because we see it on every website that we shop at.
Michael.
So I'm not going to do a casting spell, but the spell would be to make InDesign fully and easily accessible in creating content.
So we
What
can.
difference would that make, Michael?
That would change the very face of accessible publishing. It would, better than that, it would just make all publishing accessible.
Yes.
Okay. I understand now why you picked that spell. So we have Pedro and Avneesh.
Pedro can go ahead.
Please go ahead. And maybe you have a magic spell for us.
Okay, so the magic spell would be acabar com a urucubaca.
Right.
I was going to use that
Let's see
one.
how the
but
captionists do with that. We want to hear it again.
Acabar com a urucubaca.
Unknown term, it says.
And unknown term, okay. I would suggest that publishers also have to hire people with print disabilities in their process, to really understand that and cooperate with the people that could bring them a really full understanding of the product.
Great. Well, that brings us finally to you, Avneesh, to end this casting session.
Well, I am coming from a little different kind of perspective. Looking at the global environment, coming from the DAISY standards point of view, a DAISY book, if it's valid DAISY book, it was accessible. I would see in the future, I would like to see that the accessibility becomes embedded in the mainstream standards itself, so that we do not need a separate EPUB accessibility specification. If someone creates an EPUB, it means it is accessible. It will mobilize all the changes in design, production processes. Everything will be pulled to become accessible. On the other hand, I will also like to see reading systems competing specifically on the accessibility features, which becomes a driving force. And I would like to see what happens tomorrow in our reading system sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. So Avneesh here is talking about some further meetings we have at the very long day for many of us at the DAISY Consortium. We have technical meetings tomorrow. And true to form, real value for money, we got 2 spells from you, Avneesh. Thank you to Avneesh, to Cristina, to Laura, to Pedro, and to Michael. Let's give them a hand. Please. You can leave the stage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, so as we bring this conference on accessible publishing to a close, I want to express my really profound gratitude to all of you who have participated in this event. Over the day, we've engaged in insightful discussions, we've shared innovative ideas. In the breaks, and maybe in the sessions too, we've forged connections that will undoubtedly contribute to the future of accessible publishing in the UK. The commitment and the passion displayed by each of our speakers in advancing accessibility within the publishing industry is truly commendable. As we leave here today, let's carry forward the spirit of collaboration and determination with the voices of the people with print disabilities we heard ringing in our ears, working together to ensure that literature and knowledge are accessible to all, regardless of their abilities or challenges. I think we should be confident. Together we can create a world where every individual has the opportunity to learn, to read and grow. Thank you for all your hard work, for your attention, and we all look forward to seeing the positive impact that collectively we'll make in the realm of accessible publishing. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you again to Google for hosting us. Safe travels, and I look forward to meeting you again next time. Thank you all.